Kate Milafalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And I am absolutely delighted to introduce my guest, Steve Ridge, private investigator. Welcome, Steve.
Well, it's great to be with you.
This is thrilling. You have no idea. Private investigator is kind of what my alter ego profession.
Well,
so I am dying to find out how you got into it.
Well, it actually takes me back to my early media. One of my early jobs in television actually was in Sioux City, Iowa, at the NBC affiliate, and I was hired to be an investigative reporter. And so I looked for, not the day-to-day coverage. I mean, I would go do that if it was required or what have you. And, you don't have huge staffs and all that. But I also had an investigation underway on the side, a project that I could nurse along and then bring to the table. And that's what gave me the most pleasure, I think, and reward for the time that I was spending. That happened to include a mysterious double murder in Emmitsburg, Iowa, in I think it was 1975. And I ended up pursuing that and went and interviewed who I had heard could be under suspicion. They didn't want to talk at first, but convinced them to talk. And a short time after they talked, and we put it on the air, the district attorney, the state of Iowa, the DCI, were in touch. We need to get a copy of that. We're about to arrest them. And so I kind of I stumbled into some pretty good luck in the case. They were tried eventually, and they got off. I would say is probably technicality, and they were living in a small town. So when the jury came back, they were exonerated. Within a couple of days, the community burned their house down and they left town. So,
oh my God, who were the victims?
Well, they had gone on a double date, and the couple was Niall and Norma Smith, and it was alleged that the other party, the male party, had made advances to his wife, and that prompted them to go out
they knew each other.
Yeah, so he shot him to death, and I think that this is a case where I believe there was guilt there, but they were never convicted. And I, in the meantime, moved on in the media. I moved around Iowa, I moved to Alabama, I moved to New York, working for ABC. I always, in my roles, as I moved up in the media world, in management, that's where I ended up. And I found, I could accomplish a lot more as a manager than I could, as a one-off investigator or what have you. And I could hire people, train them to do what I was doing. So, but as I moved up and eventually to what was, I guess, the country's largest media consulting firm, I retained my interest in cold cases and in murders. And I worked on murders in Alabama and Florida and New York. And I had some pretty good success. And I used a lot of conventional means, including having brought psychics.
Hey, I was going to ask you about that later. I have that on my list. I'm really curious about that. So can I take you back a little bit to when you were growing up? Was this need to know the unknown, was that kind of a motivating thing for you as a kid?
It was. And I think by today's standards, I would have quickly been judged to have ADHD or ADD, whatever.
Whatever sells a pill, right?
I don't know. But my attention span was not long. And when I found something of interest to me, I would tackle it, completely and be consumed completely by it. And I really always had this curiosity, to look into things, to ask questions, and try to figure out what the truth was about what was going on. That continued to fuel my interest as I moved into the media. Then it's only been 7 years ago I actually got my private investigator license when I left the company that I was with for 37 years and had been COO. That was the media consulting firm. So the last 7 years I have dedicated to private investigation. I specialize in murders, and all the work that I do on cold case murders, I do pro bono. I will not take a case for money. That has served me well. I'm trying to give back to a business that was good to me, and I found that a lot of people who are in dire need of my assistance simply can't afford.
Yeah, that's admirable. If you listen to podcasts, I started out with podcasts years ago when I started to walk every day, and I got addicted to true crime podcasts. I've evolved, but at the time I listened to a million true crime podcasts, and it struck me how many unsolved disappearances and murders there are, and families and friends are just left with the situation completely unresolved. And human beings have a real hard time with that. It's a very terrible state psychologically and emotionally. But just a little bit of a light-hearted question before we really get into the case you're working on. If you could be any famous detective or investigator, real or fiction, who would it be? Like, who do you admire?
Well, I got to tell you, I probably would pick Columbo. The crime solver in me always had me, still trying to solve crimes and figure them out. And I believe that style can be important in communication. And my skill, if I have one, it's getting people to talk. And so anybody I've ever observed or any of the shows I've ever seen, I've always tried to think, or look at how they loosen people up or what technique.
Yeah. That skill to disarm people and to have a rapport with people is probably, I don't know, 50% of the kind of job you have. If you don't have people skills, you're not going to be able to find anything out, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, and this case we're about to get to, without getting into it, but I'll just tell you, the self-proclaimed leading suspect in the case, who had gone silent for 24 years, had moved out to Arizona, and I made 4 trips to Arizona, and eventually down and talked to me several times for a total of 11 hours. It's the only he ever did, and he passed away this past
this is Van how does he say it? Van Sachi?
It's John Van Sice.
Van Sice. Yeah, I didn't know how to pronounce it. So you end up actually kind of evolving into private investigation from investigative journalism. Doesn't surprise me. They're kind of two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah.
So let's just talk about this really sad disappearance. I was struck. I watched a lot of video of Jodi. This is the case of Jodi Huisentruit, right? Watched a lot of video of her doing her job, both on the record and off the record. She'd be waiting to be recorded for the TV camera, but she'd be dealing with people. Just an enormous amount of charisma, and she seemed like a really nice person. She didn't seem like a big phony,
Absolutely.
And how did you know? You didn't know her before she disappeared, did you? Because you were kind of in the same area.
Well, we were in the same area, and I have since learned that apparently she attended one of my training seminars very early in the year. I didn't realize it when I took an interest in the case, but literally, she started her career than 2 miles away, of my residence.
Right.
She worked at a TV station. I worked at her in my career. My company actually coached her. That is on-air training for her in her three stops in the business, and all of those were clients. So we had a I don't know if it's 6 degrees of separation. It feels more like 1 degree of separation.
Sort of circling each other like planets or something for quite a while, right? So it was Sioux City and then Minnesota and then back to Mason City.
That's right. Yeah, she actually, it was Cedar Rapids was where she started. So
Cedar Rapids, yeah. Well, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. It's the Great Void east of the Rockies. I don't know.
Iowa, and you wouldn't be able to tell one town from another.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Just similar looking and in attitude. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of small towns. The biggest cities are Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, but it's a very nice state. We've got really good schools, police and fire, terrific taxes. Prices are, below moderate, I would say. Even housing, pretty decent, and so it's a great place to stay. That's where I raised my family, and we didn't have a desire to move to the major city way.
I hate to interrupt you, but your voice is cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry. How about now? Better?
Yeah. Let's see. It was cutting out every few words.
Oh, okay. Let me just adjust this a little and see. Is that
that's better? That's louder anyway. It's better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's try that.
Don't you love technology? I swear. It's going to be the death of me. I swear. Okay, let's see here. So I don't think we need to go over the exact details. She didn't show up for work. They talked to her. She was on her way. She never showed up. They called the police. The police show up in the parking lot of her apartment building. Why don't you take it from there?
Well, that's right. So when she didn't show up, which she had been known to be late, and when she didn't show up, finally, about 2.5 hours after she was not, she had been contacted, they sent police over for a check, and when police arrived, they quickly found her car was still in the lot, and that there were a bunch of items scattered around: a red high heel, and the blow dryer, comb, and earrings, and it was very apparent that she probably had been abducted or that something had been staged. But I think almost invariably it was an abduction. And
well, I'm going to interrupt you and just say that the bent car key to me says abduction. It's like somebody desperately trying to get a door open while resisting.
Absolutely, and that's what I believe. Now, there's been some speculation, it happened another way. I don't think there's any question. She actually got the key at least partway in the door. She was pulled to the side from behind, and they moved forward on the car until it hit the rearview mirror, which was then bent back the other way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and the key was dropped on the ground. So clearly she was abducted, and that's how she disappeared.
Well, weren't there ear witnesses, people who heard screams?
There were people at the apartment complex who later were interviewed who said they did hear screams 4 o'clock in the morning, but dismissed them. The area was near a campground where a lot of partying was known to go on, and shenanigans and all that. But I think even some of the people that heard the scream admitted that they probably should have taken action based on, what they had heard, and they simply didn't. And so somebody got incredibly lucky in getting away with it.
Yeah, it just seemed very brazen to me because Really, it's like center stage. You're in a big parking lot, but the building, that's a tall building with apartments, was right there with windows looking down on the parking lot. It seems quite brazen. It's big risk.
Well, absolutely. However, my theory is that the person was not thinking of the risk of abduction, because I believe she was approached by someone who wanted to have a conversation with her and talk to her, someone she knew, and that they approached her to talk to her and she resisted. And I think that they essentially overreacted, if you will, and tried to control her. And I think that led potentially to, her immediately being, at very least knocked out, if not murdered.
Yeah, I actually did a little deeper dive into it without going into too much detail, because now I'm using all this discretion, which goes against my basic personality. But you can find out what I did behind the paywall if you want to. I'll tell you later on Substack. However, the information that I put together was that very possibly this was an accidental injury that had to be covered up, that the person didn't go with the intention of harming her. It was a confrontation, like a
I think you
personal.
I think you have it absolutely right. There's
Yeah.
been so much other speculation that, oh,
Yeah.
this is a well-planned abduction by people from the third world, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, I
Uh,
guess you could say it might have been a stalker. We'll talk
yeah,
about the two main suspects. I think there are two, correct?
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there were people that were very interested in following her and even placing phone calls to her. But I think in everything that I have uncovered in the last few years, I think there's no doubt that this was someone she knew, was extremely jealous, and approached her to have a conversation before she went to work. It got out of control. I think with the overreaction, I do think, in fact, it's even possible that it was an act, that the attempt to control her was
Yeah.
such that led to her death.
Yeah, I think you could look at it more than one way. You could look at it as uh, because she resisted and they tried to stop her resisting, she accidentally was either knocked out or hurt in such a way that now they've got a problem on their hands. In either case, they've got the situation that they're not going to be able to get out of, even if they drop the whole confrontation and go home. Now she's going to press charges, or she's unconscious, or needs a hospital. And what do you do? So they spirit her away, and then whatever happened happened.
Yeah, and certainly the fact that there were some drag marks in the immediate area seemed to suggest that she was unconscious when she was removed from that location. So it's very likely that all or most of the damage was done during that confrontation.
Yeah, I could very easily see her being confronted and saying, "I'm done, leave me alone," and they, "You're not my whatever," and they lash out too hard,
Right.
and that's it. And
Yep.
that's what happened. Excuse me. So we have a little DNA. Did I read that right?
There wasn't any DNA that could be tied back to anyone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was palm print, there was hair fiber, but there was no blood. A lot of reports have said that there was blood. That was not
No.
didn't
Yeah.
have anything substantial that would be able to track DNA. And ironically, they didn't search the interior of the car. Now, logic would tell you, well, that person probably wasn't inside the car because she was approached as she was getting in. But good police work would be to not only, go over the entire exterior of the car, but to also process the interior. And that was never done. The car was given back to her family and sold. So, even, the current police chief said he wishes that.
Yeah, you can't undo the past, unfortunately. I want to get back to the topic of the police, but let's look at the two. I think they are the two main suspects. This John Vanice
Vance,
guy.
Vance,
Yeah. I'm going to say it wrong every single time. I have such a problem with names, and I apologize. Just John. We'll call him John.
John.
Yeah. So tell us about this character, because I found him to be very interesting.
Yeah, certainly. And John was a bigger than life guy. He was a big former college football player. He had gone through a divorce. He had only recently moved, to Mason City and met Jodi, and they began hanging out. He was 22 years older than,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a fast friendship. And Jodi often with her girlfriend and would go drink, and John and his friends would buy them liquor. In fact, some of the girlfriends said they knew they didn't have to take their purse with them when they went to the bar because they weren't spending any money. They were going to get caught for them. So, and John Van Sice also had a very nice boat, ski boat. Jodi loved skiing, so did some of her friends. So they made frequent weekend ski trips, and would go have time and party. She loved to drink. She frequently was in bars after work. Because she worked morning television anchor, she would be done by early afternoon, and would be able to go hang out in the bar and just.
Mhm. Yeah, I worked for a number of years when I was young in hospital work, and it that's very typical. You develop a rapport with the people with whom you work, and I can see that in a newsroom it would be similar. And it's one of those jobs that's all full of adrenaline and hyped up, a lot of stress. So you don't just go home and go to bed like you would in a normal job. And you probably know this yourself. You have to diffuse for a while and hash things over. And where do you do that when you're in your early 20s? You go to a bar, right? So
Yep.
I'm not surprised at all. I don't think it's necessarily even a reflection on any individual. I think it's very common, very typical behavior. I wanted to ask you something about that. Oh, so I have this sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm just jumping to conclusions, but I had a sense that there was a disconnect between them. I think she appreciated the boat and the drinking and the golfing and all that stuff, the skiing that he offered her. I think he had more ulterior intentions towards her. Did she realize, am I wrong about that? Did she realize
Well,
that?
yeah, I think it's fair to say that Jodi was a bit naive, and I
Yeah.
think a bit of a risk taker. And I think she felt like she was pretty much always in control and all of that. I don't think there's any question but what John was completely taken with her. I mean, he loved to show her around town and be seen with her and all of that. And I think he would indeed have liked a lot more out of the relationship. She
Yeah.
pretty much sort of kept.
Yeah, that I got the impression it was kind of one-sided and a miscalculation on her part. He had more interest, and I kind of got the feeling that she didn't fully realize how serious that was. Like you said, kind of naive in a way.
Yeah, I think near the end before her abduction, uh, uh, there were some things that happened that were of concern to her that led her to think that she should be scaling back the relationship, if not ending it. And so I think that played into the equation of their relationship. How that played into her potential abduction remains to be seen.
Do you think something happened that day? I read, now I might be wrong, but I read that she just had a birthday. He videotaped it. He invited her over to come watch the video. Do you think there was some sort of a discussion about cooling off the relationship?
I think there very likely could have been, and I don't think that we have hard evidence that she went to look at that tape. I think they may have a conversation about her.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the problems with looking at true crime cases, because I've been doing this now for a couple of months, and just it's purely superficial. I am not a private investigator. I am not a journalist. I'm just interested in a mystery. And so I know some of these cases from having listened a lot to podcasts or watching TV shows about them, but I don't investigate them. I don't know. And many of them are controversial. People debate the facts. People are not sure what the facts are. And I read that she went to his house to watch the video. So that's wrong, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the common that's what John contended. But I've never been able to verify that. And the time stamped on long distance call from her apartment would indicate that she really didn't have time to go before that phone call. And it's pretty unlikely that she went there afterward. I don't think that that's fact. And to your broader point, there are a lot of assumptions that get made, a lot of things that get repeated by reporting over time
Yeah.
that verified. And so one of the first things I had to do a fact check across everything.
Yeah.
A
It was
lot,
hard. Yeah.
lot of common beliefs,
Yeah.
including the fact that there was blood at the scene, blood evidence. I mean, this was all over.
No, I actually didn't read that. I did discover pretty quickly that people are very emotionally invested in their version of any crime story. People get really angry if what you purport is the narrative is not their version of the narrative. Very emotionally invested. Have you found that's a wall you come up against?
I certainly have, and I will tell you that I had some early resistance or pushback or feedback, even from the friendship circle, about the things that I'm reporting. Now, however, I will tell you now, 6 years of reporting, I have heard from some of those people that say, "Hey, sorry, I questioned, what you were doing originally. You've stayed on this. You've advanced the case. You've found, that evidence destroyed in the case. You've had witnesses that had never come forward." You know, they kind of apologize and say, "I think we have to take your accounting of this case seriously."
Are people resistant to anything that might have impugned her reputation or put doubt into her behaviors? I know there's a real tendency, especially with women, to against women victims, to blame them, what they wore, where they went, how late they were, what they drank. All of those things are little check marks. Well, what would you expect? You're putting yourself in harm's way. Were her friends protective of her?
They were, and I think that that's not all a bad thing.
Mhm.
And I know her sister very, very well, and her sister continues to defend her reputation. And I believe that while Jodi was young and naive and a bit of a risk taker, that she was not permitted. I mean, that wasn't Jodi, and so that has pretty much been verified over time. And I think that's part of what people have come to accept what I reported. One thing that was touchy at the time, I reported that the weekend before abducted, she had gone with John Van Sice and some other friends to go skiing down in the Coralville Reservoir. And when they were there was another boater, bigger boat that came up, and two gentlemen, young guys, were on it and asked, if she'd like to go for a ride. And, they did go for a ride and even danced on the boat. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It was very common practice down on the reservoir. People partying all the time, even a little drinking going on. It was just very, very common, and it wasn't any reflection that she was a bad person or had, poor judgment. She's a 27-year-old single young woman.
That's right. If she had been a 27-year-old single young man, nobody would have thought twice.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah. That I find that is pervasive in a lot of these stories. The first narrative presented always involves, how did the victim ask for it? How did they make themselves vulnerable? And you should, theoretically, a woman should be able to be out anywhere at any time and have confidence that predators are not going to be after them. Well, it's not true, though. We know that. But yeah. Well, I had another question. Oh, what you said you went to Arizona and talked to him 7 times? 4 times?
4 times for a total of 11. Yes.
So what's your conclusion with him? What do you think about him?
Well, John is an interesting guy, but when I met him, he was just on the cusp of early onset dementia, actually all these. And so I have always tried to factor in the fact that with the onset of Alzheimer's, you never know for sure when the brain begins to have aberration, what have you. And so if he said things I later determined not to be true, I concluded it may not be because he doesn't believe it. It just may be that that's what his brain was imparting
it's a
at that
process.
time.
Yeah.
And John's a very likable guy. I mean, I will tell you, and I do believe someone is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
But I also party to cases where I knew people guilty, but probably not be, found guilty in a court of law. And so I became, I think, I would say, kind of friends with John and his wife, who he later married when he was in Arizona, and have stayed in touch. I mean, I'm the one that actually released the information that he had died. It's never been confirmed by the police, by the county, by a funeral home. There's no obituary. There's no factual reporting that John Van Vice is dead.
Is that intentional?
Yes. Yeah. The family preferred just I issued a statement on their behalf and asked for their, they wanted privacy in his death.
Yeah, they didn't want the whole thing brought up again, right. And have that be the final word, since he's dead and can't defend himself. No, I understand that. I'll just tell you this: standing in a grocery store one day with my husband decades ago, the National Enquirer, the Weekly World News, and I was kind of glancing at the headlines, and there was a picture of O.J. Simpson and his wife. And I knew nothing about, I'm not into sports, and or really bad movies. So I turned to my husband and I said, he's going to kill her. I rest my case, Your Honor. So,
I'm
pardon?
Very careful about what I ask you to weigh in on here then.
Oh, no. Oh, it's not that extreme. So John was, it's safe to say he was the primary suspect, right? For a long time.
Characterized himself as that, which was interesting. Police have never named a suspect. They've said, we've explored persons of interest, but we don't have a suspect. The investigation is going on. But John very clearly said, hey, I'm the primary suspect. They've been all over me, investigating me all these years. And he was very, very open about it. And there's nothing that I have uncovered that could exclude him from potential involvement in the case.
You got cut off there, preclude or include?
Nothing could exclude him.
Exclude. Okay.
Exclude him. He now there are other people. I have said that I think that within the last few months, I've said that I thought there were up to 4 people who would be persons of interest in my mind. I wouldn't go quite as far as suspects, but and I haven't disclosed who they are. But obviously, John, at least as it relates to the police, he's been number one
Right.
suspect there.
So there's, the potential of an anonymous stalker, which I don't think that's entirely likely. Then there's John, but then there's this new boyfriend she had. Now I've read that she had a new boyfriend who was much younger than John, more her contemporary, excuse me, and that they'd been together for about 10 days only. So what's the story
That's
there?
right. Well, I'll tell you, I was several years into the investigation when I finally was able to contact this individual, and he immediately fessed up that he said, yeah, I had a very serious and blooming relationship, budding relationship with Jodi. I met her Saturday night at a bar 10 days before she went missing. They went golfing together. They had dinner. They had drinks on his patio. She put her car in his garage.
Can I ask something about that before you go further?
Yeah.
She put her car in his garage because she didn't want anyone to know that she was at his apartment, or why would she do that?
That would cross the line into speculation. I do know that.
Well, yeah.
Temperature was around Clear Lake on that day. It was around 90 degrees, so it was a hot day, at least for Iowa. And so it could have been for the heat. And she had a convertible, so if the top was down, that could be worse from the standpoint of absorbing heat. But the point, she was comfortable enough that she parked her car in the garage, and it was a car to be noticeable. I mean, it was a small, a red Mazda Miata.
Yeah, we're familiar with those cars. When they first came out, every 40-year-old man in the world bought.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they're very cute, really cute little cars. And when I read that, I laughed. It didn't surprise me. That's exactly the kind of car you would have expected somebody with her kind of a buoyant personality to drive with, isn't it? Yep. So, I interrupted myself there. I had another person to ask him. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. So somewhere, somehow, I heard this story and it's muddled in my memory. Maybe this will mean something to you. But the report of youngish male voices coming from her apartment the night before she disappeared, is that something I'm imagining?
No, you're not imagining it. Now, I don't know to what extent that has been reported, but I am aware. I'm aware personally that there were several younger men in an apartment either adjacent to or below her apartment. She was on the second story of the apartment building, so there were people partying or what have you in that building overnight.
Oh, so it may not have been coming from her apartment at all.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that there were a few more suspects, and I know you want to maintain an element of anonymity, but are these people that the police have even considered?
I can't conclusively say that they have. They certainly be people that police have known about, without a doubt. The question is, did they take a hard look, and if so, how hard a look? And that, I think eventually we may know that, but we don't know at this particular time. I mean, the case remains open.
Yeah, I know. Without revealing, I know you don't want to, but just out of curiosity, my own curiosity, because I'm nosy, were these possibly people that were in her circle, either at work or friends or family, or were these strangers with a record?
I would say that all of them were people she knew.
Okay, that makes sense. So I read that in October of this last October, they got a search warrant for an apartment construction site in Mason City because they got a tip to look for a body. Am I reading
Well,
that properly?
you're right, except it was up in Minnesota that they went to conduct the search. I had gotten the same tip, and frankly, working with my sources, I didn't feel that it merited a search. Well, or at least it would only be to rule it out. And that turned out to be not anything. There were some um, fragments or bones of an animal that were found at that site, but nothing. So, but that's the only thing that police have confirmed publicly in recent years. It got a lot of attention. So that's funny the way it works. I mean, well, it's the way the media works. It picks you get a press release from the police, and everybody in the world reports it. It's easy to report. It's harder to do what I do, but a lot of outlets have covered all of my revelations, and you know, so I am heartened at the fact that I've had the credibility in the case that I think I've earned, and I think all my information has pretty much been spot on.
Well, I've heard from a lot of people who watch my channel, and I was really surprised at how many people said, "Oh, I'm so glad that somebody is paying attention to this." That they still had an interest. They knew about it. They remembered it from when it happened, and they were still interested in it. I think there is a sense of the unresolved out there and of course, for the family and friends. That's got to be a special kind of hell to have to live through. But
Uh,
for the general public, there's that curiosity. I try to save the best for last. I am absolutely gobsmacked by the whole diary situation, that 80 plus pages of her personal diary being sent to a newspaper, right?
right.
And turns out the police chief's wife sent it.
Yes, it was a
What?
yeah,
What is that?
this was not not the police chief at the time of her disappearance. It was the next police chief that came in. His wife had previously worked at the local newspaper, the Globe Gazette in Mason City. And after he left office, reportedly, he accidentally took a copy of the diary, an 80-page diary, and you accidentally took a copy. Let's talk about it. Well, they never charged. She sent it anonymously. She drove to another town to mail it. So I
Yeah.
didn't want it to be tracked back to him, but they quickly learned that he had taken the copy and that she had mailed it. And he eventually died, and she dropped out and moved to another state. I've reached her, but she won't talk to me to ask her why she would do that. I
Well,
don't.
I got the feeling that it was like an angry divorce stuff.
Yeah. Well, well, I think it was a reflection. I think there was suspicion about you know uh, this police chief and his tenure and all that, and I think it was kind of to get back at the community, or to the local county officials that had hired the police chief. Well, it'd be the city, actually.
Can you talk about these allegations? I mean, if I know about them, they have to be out there. A lot of people got in touch with me and said, well, finally, somebody's going to uncover the corruption, local corruption, the good old boy network. I had no idea what they're talking about. Well, do you know what that's referring to?
Yeah, I've been pretty open. This is a very delicate one because I have tried to maintain a good relationship with.
Yeah, not asking you to
But
cross.
and I will tell you that they've taken my input. They've solicited. I've had meetings with the FBI and the DCI, which is a criminal investigation of the state, with local police. So we have in fact worked at least at arm's length with one another. But at this juncture, those are all new people. And at the time that this abduction happened, there was a lot of corruption in the community. It was one of the largest Midwestern areas for drug development and distribution. It was right off major Interstate 35 south and Interstate 80 east and west, was just not too far to the south. And a lot of drugs came up from Mexico. There was a local developer of drugs, locally a producer, a manufacturer, and distributor, who was eventually found guilty of having murdered 5 people to quiet them. There were reports that some police officers were looking the other way, that they had been reselling used weapons that were in the archives of the police station, just a lot of things like that. And the drug, it was so pervasive in the community that it was everywhere. And so there were a lot of people that were protecting the information, and had reason to want to not unravel the case because how peripherally it might affect them, or how it might tangentially connect them to illegal and inappropriate activity.
Well, I'm not sure what the connection is. Why would a disappearance of a young woman be connected to drug corruption?
Well, it would come down to what information, because there was also, I believe, some awareness with the drug community of what happened to Jodi. So let's put it this way: there were people who knew what happened, and they have not come forward. And that's why originally I had put up a $50,000 reward, and during the anniversary 2 years ago, I upped it to 100,000.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, I thought it was only at 50,000 from 25. Now, where did that money come from?
Well, it was my funds. I don't, I don't
Steve?
attention to that, but I did pretty well in the business. It's another way I can give back, and
Wow.
I felt as though if I could get somebody to come forward, I would solve the crime. And I will just tell you, if you knew her sister as well as I do, and had heard the anguish that she has every day,
Yeah.
you probably might try to clear up that money too. I mean,
No, I understand. Yeah.
Like, I'd rather do that than have a new car. I mean, I just would.
I like to say that I enjoy true crime, and that is a really poor choice of words. It's intellectual curiosity about the unsolved, but behind it all, always, it never far from the surface, I feel this enormous sorrow for the families involved. There is so much suffering, so much unknown, unresolved, lack of answers. You, as a mother, I can imagine you're haunted, especially at night, when your thoughts run free. What happened to your child? I just can't even imagine the special kind of hell that is. So I hear you when you say that you'd be willing to part with money because this is so much greater of a situation. You said something that I want to go back to about, the little issue of people knew what happened. Some people knew what happened.
Yes, I believe that at least 2 people know exactly what happened. I think they're still alive. I think they could come forward. I wasn't sure that my reward money would do the trick, and it hasn't. But I believe there are a couple of people who have decided not to, tell the truth, share information that they have about what happened, at least a part of what happened. So let's say maybe not exactly how the abduction came down, but perhaps the fact that she died and was needed to be buried somewhere, that type of thing. So there are a couple of people with information. I kind of hope they're as sleepless as Jodi's sister Joanne is.
That's so curious because does that exonerate John because he's dead? They have nothing to fear from that, or is it the fear of self-implication, aiding and abetting afterwards by not saying anything about hiding the body?
Yeah, I think self-implication of some level, absolutely. Yeah, funny. I get hundreds of emails and phone calls and letters on this case. And I got one the other day from someone in Chicago that asked that precise question, which was, if John Van Cise is now dead and he had anything to do with it, why forward? And I pretty simply addressed the fact that the whole case is just more complex than that. And you don't know, they might have information, but by coming forward with it could implicate them in either that crime or other crimes. It's a slippery slope.
And maybe whoever helped to dispose of the body was not the person that created the body, but that person is still alive and they fear that person. So it's complex.
Yeah, it is complex. And the layers to this, I don't know. I always look at things, first of all, I look at it's a spider web where you work your way out, or leaves on a tree and all that, to where things lead. But then I also look at the layers, how stuff,
like an onion. Yeah.
And the layers that can lay on top of what happened.
Yep.
And you can't get to the center of the onion unless you peel those layers off. And that's what this is all about. I've been doing it for 6 years, maybe 7. I don't know. But
it's a great metaphor. I just cut an onion yesterday, and you hit a bad spot, and so you're kind of trying to work around it and get to the next layer. It's perfect metaphor. So do you think that this is likely the only death this person is responsible for? We're not talking about a psychopathic serial killer here.
I would tell you, I got to be careful with this answer. Tell you, this is the only death that I am certain they're responsible for. There could be that they've been in and around other deaths that would warrant investigation. Let's put it that way.
It seems to me that if we go with the story that I get the impression that you kind of agree with me about, that this was impulsive and accidental perhaps, and unintended the way it unfolded, and the big crisis for this perpetrator was, what do I do, right? And so the extrapolating from that, let's stipulate to that scenario, and extrapolating from that, then this person, you're kind of implying, may have been in the periphery of other similar situations.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in Jodi's periphery. So yeah, I think the way you describe it is what I've been saying, and a lot of others that studied this case are very dismissive of the possibility. But yeah, I think it was a very lucky outcome that this
incredible, yeah,
not caught either in the act or soon thereafter by people turning heads the other way, or what have you. And
it's not easy to get rid of a body.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I think very, very basically, I don't think people understand what the expression dead weight means. Yeah. Yes. That alone is formidable. And then nowadays with maybe not so much in 95, but nowadays with forensics, as sophisticated as forensic science has become, it's awfully hard to get away, to not leave some trace of yourself behind that can be detected, right? Fascinating.
Yeah, there's no doubt that things have changed dramatically in terms of crime solving, potential crime solving, and progress has been made. It is harder, I think, to get away with murder, but it's not impossible. And there are, and part of it may be luck. Everybody makes mistakes. Okay, I mean, I've never seen a crime where somebody didn't make a mistake. The question is, did the mistake come back to bite them?
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times.
So one last really important question. How good do you think Jonathan Groff is in the role in Mindhunter? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know that? Are you familiar?
Good.
I was shocked when I put 2 and 2 together. I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes. I don't necessarily recognize actors. When I realized who it was after the fact, I went, wait a minute, I know him as a Broadway song and dance man. What is he doing with this FBI criminal profiler role? It was pretty good, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the versatility of some actors is really beyond belief. I mean, that's what I guess makes them so exceptional. But yeah, I would say that if I hadn't known or read about it, I'm not sure I would have recognized what I was seeing.
Me neither. Another one that comes to mind for me is Cate Blanchett, the actress.
Mm-hmm.
She's like a chameleon. She's my favorite actress, and yet I'd say 8 times out of 10, I don't recognize her until after the fact. She was in a movie early on with Billy Bob Thornton and John Cusack called Pushing Tin. Do you remember that? It's about air traffic controllers. It wasn't until the credits came up that I realized my favorite actress is in this movie. She is able to morph into a completely different person. It's fascinating, but that's neither here nor there. Pardon?
Morph is the word, because that they're able to assume an entirely different persona or what have you in a way that I mean, that's just a skill. It's an incredible skill for sure.
Well, I think it's the distinction between sorry, it's freezing here. It's the distinction between an actor and actress and a star. A star is always his or herself. You always just, sorry, him or herself. You always just see them. But a true actor, they become the part they're playing. Yeah. That's how I judge, and I judge more than anybody. Well, I have to tell you, this has been such an interesting conversation. This case has sort of haunted me for years and years and years. I don't know why, but.
Well, you're not alone. I will tell you, the interest in this case is, I mean, it's international.
Really?
Around the globe. I've had newspapers do stories on this case. It's one of those cases. I think it's got, this is a young television anchor, morning anchor, very attractive, very vivacious. And they're just lots of pictures of her in her role. So it's almost kind of a made for TV movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to personalize it and make her a real person and not just a concept. She had so much charisma. You can feel it when you watch her, like I said, on the TV. Absolutely. I have a question for you. You mentioned, you've traveled. I think you said Alabama, New York. You've been around doing other cases. Are you familiar with the case of Maura Murray?
You broke up just a little bit. If you can.
Oh, are you familiar with the case of Maura Murray?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, I'm going to give you an assignment, and I'm hoping we can talk again. Maura Murray is a nursing student who disappeared from, well, she was in New Hampshire, but she went to school at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And it's one of these stories that has grabbed people. It's M-A-U-R-A, Maura, M-U-R-R-A. And I won't belabor all the details, but she was essentially asked to leave West Point for stealing from the Fort Knox gift shop.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable. Oh, there was stuff going on. And there is a podcast called Missing Maura Murray that started out a number of years ago and ran with all the theories. And there are a million crazy theories and dead ends and red herrings and such an intriguing case. But I think often of her family, because for 20 something years, her father has gone every weekend from somewhere in Massachusetts. I think he lives near Boston, and driven up to New Hampshire to where she disappeared and searched the woods for her every weekend for 20 some years. This doesn't go away for people who love those who disappear or who die. Yeah, let me know what you think of that. I promise you, it's like an addiction, this story. It's unbelievable story. Unbelievable.
I will check it out.
Okay, thank you. Well, Steve, I just really cannot tell you how much I appreciate your generosity to do this. Unlike you, I am not a journalist. Just trying to give people something to think about. And my hope, a lot of the true crime that I've covered recently, and it's a new thing for me to do, are cases that have haunted me. And I have to assume, extrapolating from that there's something about them that really demand attention. And I'm hoping to keep cases in the public eye. That's my real goal. So to be able to talk with somebody so close to the investigation is such an honor and a treat. And you've just been so much fun, so interesting. I really appreciate it.
Very good. Well, I wish you luck, and I'm happy to keep you posted on developments. You probably will read about some other cases I'm involved in, and we could talk about those sometime too.
Well, I'm so happy you made that offer, because I was gonna just beg with no shame. So don't go away. I want to say goodbye to you, but let me say goodbye to people watching. Thank you, everybody, very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Steve as much as I did. What a fabulous, fabulous guest. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve, and Slán go fóill. Slánte.